Episode 17 of GBGuns Armory, looking back at stuff that has been reviewed and stuff from my own collection from the past, and talking a little bit about the guns, but really about stuff that relates around it. This one, not so common. In fact, I'm not even sure I did a full review on it, but it's from my collection and I wanted to share it with you guys because it brings up some interesting thoughts. To throw some twists in it, I'll say this is a military rifle with an integrated comp or brake on the end. It was the first rifle to use direct impingement, true direct impingement, and be standard issue. It's in 6.5, firing a 140 grain bullet, and it had this nice little medallion of specs on there for match purposes, so the armor knew exactly what the bore was like when handling it. Uses a very interesting action type. Normally this stays closed, but give you an idea on the bolt. Neat way to pull it open there. And then with the mag out, because it is a detachable box magazine, 10 round. Right. There you go. That's the action slamming closed. This is an AG-42 Ljungman. I know it's spelled a little weird, but Ljungman's how it's pronounced. Jag måste säga, jag pratar inte svenska. I don't speak Swedish. This was a Swedish World War II issue. This particular one happens to have been made in 1943. What an interesting time to be a Swede in 1943, right? Not sure which side was going to win. Not sure which side they wanted to have win. They kind of just wanted to be left alone. And so in 43, when the major forces were generally using bolt actions, the Swedes fielded this thing with, I think, some rather advanced features. You got those ports up front, but the DI system, the camera will catch it. See that pipe sticking out right there? That pipe blows gas directly into that hole. I don't know if the camera's going to catch it. You guys are going to have to watch the tabletop video. And the gas directly acts on the bolt to cycle the gun. Pretty novel at the time, and it's real direct impingement. Now, no matter how you feel about Military Arms Channel and some of his opinions, one thing that he is right on and is that the AR-15 is not truly direct impingement. The gas, yes, enters the carrier, but then it acts on an area between the bolt and the carrier as a piston. So it's sort of a gas piston internal, if you will, whereas this is about as direct impingement as it gets. The gas directly impinges on the bolt and causes the action to cycle. As I understand, about 30,000 of these were made back in the 40s. There's a significant number of them in the US though, a surprising amount. They're not super rare, not that hard to get your hands on. I found this one at a small town gun shop in Washington about a decade ago. Paid a decent amount for it, but it was something unique and it really tickled my fancy in collecting World War II rifles, which is where all of this really got started, was World War II rifles. And my thoughts on it, and I'm curious to hear how you guys feel about it, is that World War II was sort of the last chance at organic engineering. Sure, you had like the Mosin Nagant in the Soviet Union, which had been in service since 1891, was a partially French, partially Russian design, but in general you had nations building their own things with their own brainiacs. The US had Browning. You know, each country had its own peak designer creating its own thing, and so to think about something as literally life-altering as a world war and as big as World War II was, to me I found it fascinating to look at pieces of history and what each country was fielding for its troops. Now, of course, you have economies of scale, you have industrial capability limitations, all of that kind of stuff. But I found each rifle to be a very different representation. This thing is a bit long, kind of awkward in the ergonomics here. It's a little thin in the stock, but otherwise balances pretty well. Very interesting and different style of action, but having 10-round detachable box magazine. And one thing about detachable magazines of this time, it wasn't for speed of reload so much as it was for servicing and being able to get into the gun. It wasn't a thing that, guys didn't run around with a whole bunch of magazines, as far as I've been told. If you know otherwise, please tell. But the action type, the construction, I mean, this thing is very Swedish feeling to me. You might recognize the action bit from the some Egyptian rifles. That's because the Swedes sold their tooling to Egypt, who later on created similar rifles, but in 8mm Mauser and 7.62 x 3.9. Speaking of calibers, this fires the 6.5 by 55, sometimes referred to as 6.5 Swede, sometimes referred to as Swedish Mauser, because the Swedes had a Mauser chambered in it. But interesting cartridge. Think about it. We've got 4 more millimeters of case length than a 308, but it's shooting a nice and sleek 6.5 millimeter cartridge. Where have we heard about 6.5 and it being cool? Seems like it came back around in style. This ammunition is some Hornady Superformance 140 grain, advertised velocity of 27.35. So not too bad. I don't know what it does out of this barrel. That would be something to do someday. The ammunition for this stuff used to be really available and fairly affordable, because there were so many guys that bought those old Swedish Mausers and had sporterized them and used them for hunting. Funny that 6.5 was a great hunting round decades ago. Not everything that's new in this industry is new. But I wanted to share this with you guys and hear if any of you have had a similar affinity to collecting, if you've seen one of these or shot one of them. But I can tell you, this is a night and day difference from a Mauser or a Mosin-Nagant. Quite the machine. Interesting setup. My trigger sometimes malfunctions, which is part of why I didn't shoot this that much. And the other bit is, well, when I bought this a decade or two ago, it was kind of the end of 6.5 by 55 ammo being something you could pick up at a regular shop, because the old guys that sporterized these and hunted with, well, not these, but hunted with the Mausers in this chambering, had hung up the guns and either moved on to something different or weren't hunting anymore at all. If you'd like to see a little more of this action up close, I believe I have a video on the main channel. I'll link to it if I can find one. If not, I might have to make one. But it is a fascinating concept. You have these ears here to keep your hands from getting bit off by that bolt when it slams forward. I'm not a gun historian. I did look this stuff up when I first got it. That was a long time ago. I don't remember it all. But they still hold a special place for me, even though the main channel's mostly moved to defensive handgun. It was World War II rifles, and the surplus that was available, that was, one, relatively affordable at the time, and then two, each told a story. There's something neat about surplus guns, and whether or not there is a real story behind that serial number or not, holding, shooting, cleaning, handling one of these, for me, brings images, some fact-based, some imaginary, of what it must have been like to have this as a service weapon. Especially as a former service member. Some of you guys know I spent 15 years in active Army and went to both wars. I drug around an M16A2 all through Afghanistan and Iraq. So, and Afghanistan had the 203 on it. So I can feel the weight. I know what weight does to you on a long patrol. Imagining something of this length today as a service weapon, obviously what they had in mind was long distances and, well, at least let's say not urban fighting. As far as I know, the Swedes never really got too involved in World War II, so most of these never saw service. And I think that's part of why shortly after the war, the Swedes sold their tooling to Egypt, and no more of these were made. But it's a really really neat machine and really different. And what I think is cool about it is it's not just one of the weird things from the time, because there were lots of experimental platforms and things that came in at the end of the war and then were never seen again and that kind of stuff. No, this was a service rifle. This was a mainline thing. I'm sure, of course, there were Mausers still in use. But as I understand it, in 42, I think they began on these, and they ended in 44. The Swedes had moved to direct impingement with a double stack detachable box magazine. Pretty interesting, especially for a country not really known for their warfighting. At least not anything within the last millennium, right? Let me know what you guys think about the AG-42, and if you ever look at firearms beyond just mechanical device, but also as something representing a culture, an era, and a people. That's what I like seeing about these things. Dirty secret, I'm actually an artsy guy at heart. I just happen to specialize in firearms. Anyways, that's episode 17, AG-42 Ljungman, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.